Long before modern nations existed, before borders were drawn on maps, before history had clear beginnings and endings, there was an empire, so powerful, so influential, that it quietly shaped the future of human civilization. And yet, today, its name is rarely spoken. This is the story of the Akkadian Empire, a story not of legends alone, but of memory, loss, and silence. A world before empires. To understand the Akkadians, we must first imagine the world as it once was. Over 4,000 years ago, human society was fragile. Most people lived in small city-states, independent, isolated, often at war with one another. Each city had its own ruler, its own gods, its own laws. There was no concept of empire, no central authority, no shared identity, just survival. And then, something changed. The rise of a man with no name. His name was Sargon of Akkad, but history tells us something unusual about Sargon. He was not born into royalty, he was not chosen by destiny. According to ancient legend, Sargon was abandoned at birth, placed in a basket and set adrift on a river. The river carried him away, but it did not claim him. He was found, raised, and eventually became a servant in the royal court of Kish. From the shadows of power, Sargon watched. He learned how cities ruled, how armies moved, how fear worked. And one day, he acted. The first empire is born. Sargon overthrew the king of Kish, but he did not stop there. City after city fell beneath his control, not through tradition, but through force, strategy, and innovation. For the first time in human history, different peoples, different languages, different cultures were ruled by a single authority. This was revolutionary. Sargon did something no one had ever done before. He built an empire. The Akkadian Empire stretched across Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, Syria, and surrounding regions. Trade routes expanded, communication improved, administration became centralized. For the first time, the world felt connected. Power, order, and control. The Akkadians understood something vital. Power alone was not enough. They standardized language. Akkadian replaced Sumerian in administration. They built roads to move armies and goods faster. They placed loyal governors in conquered cities. This was not chaos, it was order. And for decades, it worked. The empire prospered. But power always comes with a cost. Cracks in the foundation. After Sargon's death, the empire began to change. His successors inherited territory, but not his authority. Rebellions became frequent, cities resisted control. The empire grew heavy, too large, too complex. And then, nature intervened. The climate collapse. Around 2200 BCE, the world experienced a massive climate shift. Rainfall declined, rivers weakened, fields turned to dust. This drought lasted decades. Crops failed, food shortages spread, people starved. The empire, already unstable, began to collapse from within. The invasion from the mountains. As famine weakened cities, a mysterious group emerged. They were called the Akkadians, mountain tribes, poorly documented, feared. They attacked vulnerable settlements one by one. There was no great final battle, no heroic last stand, just erosion. Slow, unstoppable, silent. The disappearance. Within a generation, the Akkadian Empire was gone. Cities were abandoned, writing stopped, trade collapsed, language faded, and time moved forward. New civilizations arose, new stories were told, and the Akkadians were forgotten, buried by time. For thousands of years, their existence was barely known until archaeologists began to dig. Clay tablets, broken statues, fragments of memory. Slowly, a lost world returned to light. The lesson of the Akkadians teaches us something timeless, that power is temporary, that progress can disappear, that memory is fragile. Even the greatest civilizations can fade into silence, not with fire, not with glory, but quietly. A final thought. As you listen, as the world grows quiet around you, remember this. History is not just what survives, it is also what is lost. And tonight, we remember the empire that time forgot. As the Akkadian Empire continued to grow, life inside its borders began to change in quiet ways. For ordinary people, this empire did not feel like a grand idea. It felt like rules, taxes, and distant authority. Farmers woke before sunrise, as they always had. They worked the soil, watching the sky for rain, listening to the wind move across dry land. Merchants traveled dusty roads, carrying grain, copper, and cloth, moving between cities now bound together by Akkadian rule. Soldiers marched slowly, their footsteps echoing against stone streets. The empire was present everywhere, but rarely seen. Life under Akkadian rule. The Akkadians understood control. They allowed conquered cities to keep their local gods, their customs, their traditions. But loyalty was not optional. Taxes were collected, tribute was demanded, resistance was punished. Clay tablets recorded everything: shipments of grain, lists of workers, orders from distant rulers. This was administration, quiet, persistent, unforgiving, and for a time it created stability. The weight of power. Yet empires carry weight. As decades passed, the Akkadian state grew heavy. Messages took longer to travel, orders arrived too late, governors became corrupt. The distance between ruler and people grew wider. In far cities, Akkadian authority felt distant, abstract, almost unreal. And when hardship came, that distance became dangerous. The sky begins to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the land began to dry. Rainfall decreased year after year. Farmers noticed first. Seeds failed to sprout, harvests shrank, fields cracked under the sun. Rivers that once fed cities began to weaken. This was not a single bad season, it was a pattern, a long silence from the sky. Hunger and fear. As food supplies diminished, fear spread quietly. Grain prices rose, storage rooms emptied, families ate less, then less again. Hunger does something to people. It erodes patience, it dissolves loyalty. When children cry at night, empires feel meaningless. Blame moved upward, from local officials to distant rulers to the idea of empire itself. Rebellion without names. Small revolts began, not grand uprisings, just refusals. Cities delayed taxes, villages hid grain, workers stopped obeying orders. The Akkadian response was force, but force requires resources, and resources were running out. Each suppression weakened the state further. The empire was no longer expanding, it was defending itself. The Akkadians return. From the mountains, the Akkadians watched. They were not an organized army, they were not an empire, they were survivors. As Akkadian cities weakened, Gutian groups descended in small, relentless waves. They did not conquer, they disrupted. They broke trade routes, they attacked supply lines, they made recovery impossible. The empire could not breathe. Collapse without drama. There was no final speech, no recorded last stand. One by one, cities emptied, administrators fled, soldiers deserted, families migrated in search of food. Writing stopped. When people stop writing, history becomes silent. The Akkadian Empire did not fall in flames, it faded. After the empire, generations passed. New rulers emerged, new languages formed, new gods were worshipped. The memory of Akkad became myth, then rumor, then nothing at all. Children grew up on the same land without knowing what once stood beneath their feet. Civilizations walked over ruins without seeing them. Rediscovery. Thousands of years later, humans returned with shovels instead of swords. Archaeologists uncovered clay tablets etched with unfamiliar names. They pieced together fragments, royal inscriptions, economic records, prayers to forgotten gods. Slowly, a lost empire spoke again, not loudly, but clearly enough to be heard. What the Akkadians leave behind. The Akkadians left no monuments that dominate the skyline. They left ideas, centralized rule, administration, empire itself. They showed the world what was possible and what was fragile. A quiet ending. As night deepens around you, as sounds fade, remember this story. An empire that once ruled the world now survives only as memory. History does not end with fire and noise. Sometimes it ends by being forgotten. And perhaps that is the most human ending of all.